There is a number that determines whether the lights stay on in Tokyo, whether factories run in Seoul, whether heating works in the homes of ordinary families across Europe this winter. That number is 21. 21 miles. The width of the Strait of Hormuz at its narrowest point, a corridor of dark water squeezed between the southern coast of Iran and the northern tip of Oman. So narrow that from the right hill on the Iranian side, you can watch the supertankers passing and count the flags on their sterns with the naked eye. Every single day, through those 21 miles, moves approximately 20% of the world's entire oil supply. Not 20% of traded oil, 20% of everything the world consumes. There is no other passage. There is no alternative route that comes close. And right now, in the spring of 2026, that passage is contested, mined, blockaded, and sitting at the center of the most significant energy crisis the world has seen since the 1970s. The question that this place forces on every economy connected to it, and there is almost no economy that isn't, is not whether Hormuz matters. The question is how something this important was ever allowed to be this fragile. To understand the answer, you have to go further back than the headlines, further back than the current war, further back even than the oil. The Strait of Hormuz has been a choke point for human civilization for more than 5,000 years, not because of petroleum, but because of geography. The Persian Gulf is a semi-enclosed sea, 600 miles long and rarely more than 200 miles wide, with only one exit to the open ocean. Everything that moves between the Gulf and the rest of the world, whether it is spices, pearls, textiles, or crude oil, passes through the same narrow opening. The Romans knew this. The Portuguese knew this when Alfonso de Albuquerque seized the island of Hormuz in 1507 and built a fort there to control the trade routes connecting Europe to India and China. The British knew this when they established their naval presence in the Gulf during the 19th century, and Iran knows it now, in 2026, with absolute precision, which is exactly why the moment the war began, Tehran's first strategic move was not to fire missiles at American carriers, it was to close the strait. Because closing the strait costs the global economy more than any missile strike ever could. The geography that makes the strait so strategically decisive also makes it, in physical terms, extraordinarily concentrated. The navigable shipping lanes through the Hormuz Passage are each only about 2 miles wide, one for inbound traffic, one for outbound, separated by a buffer zone. Through those 2-mile corridors, the largest vessels ever built by human hands move in constant procession. A VLCC, a very large crude carrier, is roughly 1,000 feet long and carries 2 million barrels of oil in a single voyage. The strait sees between 80 and 100 such transits every single day under normal conditions. The math of what this means is almost impossible to hold in the mind comfortably. One ship, 2 million barrels, one day. Multiply that across the full daily traffic, and you have a volume of energy moving through a geographic corridor barely wider than a small city's downtown that sustains the industrial activity of half the world. And the water depth in the deepest part of the navigable channel is less than 100 meters. A single large ship sunk in the wrong position could complicate traffic for weeks. A minefield, as Iran has demonstrated, can close it entirely. What makes the current crisis different from every previous Hormuz crisis, and there have been many, stretching back through 2019, 2012, and the original tanker war of the 1980s, is the completeness of the closure. In previous episodes, Iran threatened to close the strait, but never fully did. The economics were always a restraint. Iran's own oil exports transited Hormuz, and a closed strait hurt Tehran as much as it hurt its adversaries. That calculation changed in February 2026 when the United States and Israel launched strikes that destroyed significant portions of Iran's export infrastructure. With its own oil exports already severely disrupted, Iran lost its economic reason to keep the strait open. What remained was pure leverage, the ability to impose costs on every other economy that depends on the passage, while bearing relatively little additional cost itself. The trap that Iran's geography had always represented finally closed, not because Iran became more powerful, because it became more desperate in a specific and calculated way. And desperation, when it is wielded by a country sitting astride the world's most critical energy corridor, is a form of power that no military force can simply shoot its way past. The alternatives that the world has scrambled to activate in the weeks since the closure began illustrate with painful clarity how little genuine redundancy was ever built into the global energy system. Saudi Arabia's East-West pipeline, the Petroline, built during the Iran-Iraq War specifically to bypass Hormuz, has been running at its maximum capacity of 7 million barrels per day since the first week of March. The UAE's Abu Dhabi crude oil pipeline, terminating at the port of Fujairah on the Gulf of Oman outside the strait, has been running hard. Together, these two systems can move roughly 8 to 9 million barrels per day around the choke point. The strait, before the closure, was handling 20 million. The arithmetic of that gap, 11 million barrels per day simply absent from global markets, is what drove oil above $100 a barrel and kept it there. It is what forced India to prioritize household gas supply over commercial use. It is what made Japanese refiners release strategic reserves. It is what the IMF designated as the single greatest risk to the global economy in 2026. 11 million barrels per day, every day, missing, not delayed, not rerouted, gone. The mine clearance operation that U.S. Navy destroyers began in April 2026, the USS Frank Peterson and the USS Michael Murphy entering the strait for the first time since the war began, represents an attempt to begin physically reclaiming the corridor. But the nature of naval mine warfare makes this a slow, methodical, and inherently dangerous process. Iran has acknowledged placing mines in the strait. Iranian officials have also, in statements that carry their own specific terror, acknowledged losing track of some of those mines. A minefield whose own architects cannot fully map is not a minefield that can be quickly or confidently cleared. The standard mine clearance tools, remotely operated underwater vehicles, MH-53E helicopter towing systems, Avenger-class mine countermeasure ships, are effective, but they operate at the pace that caution demands, not the pace that markets or diplomats prefer. A single missed contact, a single mine that slips past a sonar sweep and detonates under a supertanker in the navigable channel. The consequences of that single miss, in terms of oil price, shipping insurance, and the confidence of the maritime industry, would set the reopening back for weeks. The broader geopolitical reality that the Hormuz crisis has forced into view is one that energy planners and strategic analysts have been warning about for decades without sufficient urgency. The world built its energy infrastructure around a choke point controlled by none of the countries that depend on it most. Japan, which gets nearly 70% of its Gulf oil through Hormuz, has no military presence in the region and no realistic ability to influence what happens there. South Korea, similarly dependent, similarly distant. India, whose 1.4 billion people depend on Gulf energy for heating, cooking, and industrial production, managed to negotiate limited safe passage for some of its vessels. 9 ships crossed in the early weeks of the crisis, before the U.S. blockade threatened even that trickle. China, which receives roughly a third of its oil through the strait, has been publicly neutral, while U.S. intelligence indicates it is preparing to supply Iran with new air defense systems. Every country that depends on the passage has a different set of relationships, different leverage, different constraints. None of them has a reliable alternative, and none of them individually has the power to simply open the strait by force. Only the United States has that capability, and even the United States is finding that capability more complicated, more costly, and more contested than any peacetime strategic planning assumed it would be. The proposals that are now being urgently discussed, a $10 billion pipeline from the Gulf states to Oman's deepwater port at Duqm, expansions of the existing Saudi and UAE bypass infrastructure, new investment from Japan and South Korea in Gulf energy security, are the right proposals. They are also proposals that should have been funded and built years ago, when the cost would have been lower and the urgency less acute. The risk-reward calculation for a $10 billion pipeline to Duqm has always been, as energy analysts noted even before this crisis, overwhelmingly favorable. Under wartime oil pricing, the exports such a pipeline could carry would pay for its construction in a single month. The reason it was never built is the same as the world remained structurally dependent